Hello everybody, welcome back to yet another video. Today I have something a little different for you. Instead of reviewing a movie or TV show or something like that, I'm going to be comparing the two industries to see which one is better, television or movies. For simplicity's sake, I will only be referring to the narrative aspects of each of these mediums, as including things like sports television, reality TV, and non-narrative film would make this video far too broad. This video is already incredibly long as it is, which is why I chose to record only audio as opposed to my normal face cam. Anyways, with all that out of the way, let's get into the video. To start off, I decided to do a poll on my Instagram to see what you all thought of this question. The total results were 6 votes in favor of movies and 1 vote in favor of television. Before I explore the poll results more in depth, I'd like to take this chance to tell you all to follow my Instagram account ntd_films. I would like to do more polls like this in the future, but getting fewer than 10 responses is such a small sample size that it hardly gives me any accurate results. Anyways, back to the video. I was actually kind of surprised by the results of the poll. I had expected movies to win, however, I was expecting it to be much more closer than it actually was. Again, I feel like a large sample size would have helped with this, but I guess now we'll never know. As a part of the poll, I asked people to give me reasons for their choices. Only 3 people actually did this, but I'm still going to go over their answers anonymously now. First up, we have someone in favor of movies, who says, "For me, TV shows can sometimes get really repetitive and contain a lot of filler. I prefer miniseries for this reason. But movies are usually straight to the point and are often better produced because the budget is being fit into a 2-hour production rather than a full season." While I'm not going to get too into my own analysis yet, I will say that I agree with each of these points. Next up, we have another pro-movie person, who says, "Movies, due to the fact that they are finite, there is a beginning and an end." While I'd argue that TV shows are pretty finite as well, I think what you're trying to say is similar to what the previous person said about filler and being to the point. Let me know if this is not the case, however, if it is, again, I agree. Finally, the third person to comment was also pro-movie, saying, "Movies, and I mean old-fashioned go to theater, because it's an event. Movies on Netflix, etc. I consider TV." Firstly, 10 out of 10 grammar there. Secondly, I'm going to have to strongly disagree with you here. By saying that movies are only ones you see in theater, you're removing the majority of cinema. Netflix and other streaming services are the future of the film industry. Just look at what Warner Brothers chose to do with all of its releases coming to HBO Max this year. Yes, there are releases in theaters simultaneously, but this is just the start of a major transition within the industry. Streaming services can make great movies, several of which have been nominated for awards over the last couple of years, and if something doesn't change with regards to the film industry, theaters and that type of viewing experience will soon be gone altogether. Okay, so now that we've heard the opinions of some of you guys, it's time to get into my own analysis. To do this, I'm going to give some input on how the different mediums stack up against each other in 7 different categories. These categories are as follows: availability, creativity of ideas, experimentability, writing, character development, cinematography, and editing. Some of these categories kind of fit within others, but still have enough of their own things to talk about to warrant their own category. What I'm going to be doing is I'll discuss the pros and cons of each medium within these 7 categories, say which has the advantage within each one, and then at the end I'll give a definitive answer for what I believe to be the better medium, TV or movies. In terms of availability, I'd say that TV is a very accessible medium. Almost anyone has a TV, or at least some sort of device to watch shows on. In recent history, you can basically watch any television show as soon as it comes out, with any device as long as it's connected to the internet. As long as you've bought the channel or streaming service, the possibilities are endless. Movies, on the other hand, are much more difficult to come by. In order to see many of the big movies that release in a given year, there's only really one way to do it legally, and that would be to see it in theater. Granted, you could always wait a few months for it to release on digital or DVD, but most of the time that's too long of a wait, especially for people like me who love movies. Of course, there's also the pre-discussed fact that more and more movies are heading straight to digital, so maybe this won't be as much of an issue in the future. However, something that is an issue for films in terms of accessibility is the cost associated with them. Seeing a movie in theaters is expensive, even without taking into account the price of concessions. Buying a copy of a movie can be equally, if not more, of a poor cost investment, especially if you buy it before realizing that it's not a movie you would like to see again. Renting movies is also an option, but again, that costs several dollars per per movie. TV, on the other hand, is not based on a pay-per-product system. Typically, you buy a channel and receive access to all of its content. However, TV subscriptions tend to be very expensive, especially since they're based on a monthly cost. Somewhere where movies are actually beneficial in this scenario is that you only have to pay for what you want. You pay to see only one movie, whereas TV forces you to pay for what you want to see, as well as the stuff you don't want to see. Somewhere where this line gets kind of blurry is with online streaming services such as Netflix, HBO Max, or Disney+. These services offer up a ton of content, both TV shows and movies, for low prices, yet chances are you won't watch everything that they provide, meaning again that you have to pay for something that you don't want. While I don't think that this is a huge deal, it does mean you have to be careful which streaming services you choose, and then you should probably limit yourself to only a few which you know you're going to use often enough for the price tag. For example, the only streaming services that I have are Netflix and Disney+, and I'm not really planning on buying any of the others anytime soon. Something else that I'd say is an important factor to which of these mediums is superior would be to compare how easy it is to actually watch them. To clarify what I mean by this, the ease of watching basically comes down to how easy it is to actually sit down and watch them once you have possession of them in one way or another. Because people tend to have shorter attention spans, you'd think that TV would have the advantage here. They tend to have 20 to 50 minute episodes which are easy to watch whenever you want. However, in order to properly experience a TV show, at least for the first time, you have to watch every single episode, meaning that the overall time commitment is actually much longer. Movies, on the other hand, require a larger block of your time at once, but require less investment in the long run. Of course, there are movies that are a part of franchises, requiring you to spend much more time watching. However, I think that most movies as a part of a franchise work well as standalone films as well, whereas individual episodes of a TV show often don't. For example, if you threw me into, say, the 6th Harry Potter film without me seeing any of the others, I could probably work out exactly what was happening and who each of the characters were. However, if you did the same thing with, say, Season 4, Episode 7 of Friends, I would probably have no clue what was going on. In terms of time requirement, I think this is why miniseries are a really effective form of media. They require less time all at once and have finite stories that don't typically last longer than a few hours. Okay, so now that I've discussed all the pros and cons of TV and movies in terms of accessibility, I'm going to decide which one has the edge in this particular category. TV is easier to access and requires shorter immediate time commitments, while also forcing you to pay for things you don't want and requiring more commitment in the long run. Movies, meanwhile, are more difficult to access, are typically more expensive to watch, and take the middle ground between the pros and cons of TV in terms of time commitment. For these reasons, I think I'm going to have to say TV wins this category. What I'm mainly referring to in this category is the originality exhibited in each medium. Firstly, I think it can be said that both of these forms of media, or really any form of art for that matter, will be inherently unoriginal. Much of TV and movies are built on pre-existing schema, and often follow very similar progressions to others that came before them. This is inevitable for any long-standing form of media, but what I think is important is how well the medium is able to alter this schema in order to create something original. TV, for example, can be split into several different genres, although what you typically see either falls into a comedy or a drama. For me personally, I feel like traditional television has gotten highly repetitive. It feels like you can't go anywhere on cable now without seeing either a cop show, a doctor show, a family drama, or a sitcom with a very lame premise. Shows like Grey's Anatomy, The Good Doctor, and New Amsterdam are essentially the exact same doctor show. Meanwhile, basically anyone can name half a dozen crime shows off the top of their head, and that's just counting the numerous NCIS spin-offs. Seriously, there's 3 different shows, and the shortest one of them is 7 seasons long. It's insane. And don't even get me started with comedies. Every year, they add more and more shows that are hardly any different from the last. Don't get me wrong, there are some great shows on TV that take their genre and revamp it. Take Lucifer in the crime drama and Brooklyn Nine-Nine in the cop genre, but for the most part, everything is unoriginal. This is actually a topic I'd like to discuss in more detail at a later date, so let me know if you guys would be interested in seeing that video. Anyways, I've dug into TV quite a lot here, but as you may have noticed, I prefaced that point with the word traditional television. That means to say that I actually think contemporary TV, as in TV shows made by or for streaming services, are fantastically original. Disney Plus's The Mandalorian is an innovative space western that has taken the world by storm. WandaVision looks amazing so far. Basically everything Netflix makes is a hit. These streaming services are great at innovating genres and creating original, unique stories, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how it advances in the future as this form of TV continues to fizzle out the old. Now, onto the movies. Like TV, there are genres that get played more often than others. For example, westerns were extremely popular back in the mid-20th century, and now the leading type of movie is arguably big superhero blockbusters. While this can be deemed as unoriginal, I'd say that even the most repetitive of movie genres are less repetitive than your typical set of TV shows. Additionally, cinema is such a diverse industry that I think there's no shortage of unique ideas out there to be found. Sure, Hollywood can be a little restricting, but there are people like Christopher Nolan that create amazing original stories within the industry. Even more so, it is quite easy to find many types of experimental film outside of the typical slot of theater movies. Film festivals and YouTube are very accessible places for fans of any type of movie to find whatever they're looking for. Basically, if you're looking for any type of movie, I guarantee that it has been made at some point in cinema's history. So with all that being said, I think the clear winner in this category has got to be movies. Even the most repetitive of film genres are much more diverse than your typical TV genre. However, with the emergence of more creative content on online streaming services, it will be interesting to see where TV sits in comparison to film within the near future. The experimentability of a medium is very similar to the creativity, with a few key differences. When I say experimentability, what I'm referring to is the medium's ability to experiment with form and style. For example, the concept for a film may be bland, but the execution of that idea may be great. For this category, I'd say that there are again pros and cons to both forms of media. Starting with TV, it is easy to see how a TV show may choose to experiment with a unique style for its series, especially if it's something that plans to last only a few seasons. For example, a show I really enjoy right now for this reason is WandaVision. The show messes around with aspect ratios, color, and temporality, all while being set within the well-established superhero genre. However, while a show may choose to do this, I'd say that it is rather rare to see. For the majority of long-running shows, keeping with an experimental concept is often decided against, either for the reason that it would be too difficult to maintain, or just that it would get boring if it were to be used for an extensive period of time. Whatever the reason, TV shows tend not to include long-term experimental concepts within their standard formula most of the time. Of course, this doesn't mean a show can't try out a concept for an episode or two, does it? Well, I'd actually say that it does. After a show has established a style, breaking from that formula to try something new is not something I would suggest. Sure, some shows do decide to do this, but it often feels weird and out of place. Essentially, once a show has decided upon a style, it's pretty much stuck with it for the entirety of its run. Movies, on the other hand, are a perfect opportunity for directors to try out experimental concepts. Just look at the Christopher Nolans and Edgar Wrights of the industry. Movies can be as stylized as you want and are often very different from each other. Sure, there is the Western standard of continuity editing, but this can be altered in many positive ways. Doing something experimental within a film is very easy to do, as it can be tried on one project and then abandoned on the next. For example, when Edgar Wright decided to base Scott Pilgrim vs. the World on a video game in terms of its overall form, he did not carry this over into Shaun of the Dead or Baby Driver. Each movie has its own unique style that does not contradict with each other, as they are independent projects. Because movies are not as dependent on what is made before or after themselves, they are readily able to stand out as an individual work with their own style and form. Movies are experimented with far more than TV shows. Take the fact that there's a whole genre of cinema called experimental film. And when this is done, it is much more successful and fitting than when it is done in TV most of the time. For this reason, I think that movies are the clear winner for this category. If I were to choose any one of these categories and say that it was the most important, it would have to be writing. A well-written plot and group of characters is the most important thing to make a successful film or show. In terms of writing characters, there's not really any difference between TV and film. The only difference I find is in the ability to have successful character arcs, which will be discussed in detail in the next section. In terms of plot, however, I think this is a section where film has the clear edge. If you compare your typical movie plot to a typical TV show plot, the film one tends to be more complex and well thought out. Don't get me wrong, some shows have fantastic plots which are well thought out and have complex subjects and themes. However, when comparing the best TV plots to the best movie plots, I think movie plots are far superior. Take for example Pulp Fiction, a classic example of a movie with a complex narrative that requires you to think and analyze about what you've just seen. Now try and think of a TV show that makes you do the same. Or maybe take Joker and its open-ended nature, something you don't see very often in shows. Movies are just a better medium to allow a writer to express complex ideas. This is probably a more subjective part of my analysis, but I believe these movies that make you think about or question what you are seeing are the best types of movie. None of my favorite movies are the ones containing straightforward plots where you know what to expect long before it happens. Again, I'd like to confirm that I do believe TV shows are capable of having complex storylines, they're just much more rare to see. I think that the main reason for this is how the medium is viewed. You typically watch a movie all at once, whereas a TV show is intended to be watched in parts. Because of this, I believe some writers may simplify their stories so that they are easier to remember over a long period of time. I have nothing to actually back up this claim, but it seems reasonable enough to me. One area where one might think TV has the advantage is in sharing very long stories that progress over time, but this is simply countered by the fact that movie franchises exist, it can do the exact same thing to a much better result in my opinion. Something else that tends to happen with TV shows in terms of writing is inconsistencies between seasons or episodes of the same show. It's just a fact that the longer you do something for, the more likely you are to make a mistake. If you're writing for the same show for well over 10 years, eventually you're going to forget about a detail previously mentioned and make something up that contradicts this without knowing it. While this does happen in movies as well, the shorter, finite runtimes make this a much smaller possibility, especially for the well-written ones. Another thing that goes almost hand in hand with this fact is that TV shows are more likely to deteriorate in writing quality over time. A movie has a fixed time limit, meaning what the writer intended to be the story will stay the story no matter what. However, TV shows often last longer than their initial intended length, and as such, get worse and worse as they progress. This is once again another reason why I prefer most limited series to actual TV shows. Movies are also typically to the point, with little to no filler, whereas a show may have several episodes per season dedicated solely to lengthening the show's overall episode count. Overall, I feel it's safe to say that movies have far better writing than TV shows, and that this category is weighted heavily in favor of films as such. So character development is a category that's kind of difficult to judge, and ties back into writing rather closely. The main reason for this is that it mainly has to do with the length of time the show or movie is going with. A movie character may have one movie to progress, or have an entire series of films in the case of a franchise. Typically, if a movie is part of a franchise, the character will go through minor changes in a single movie, while also going through major changes over the subsequent films. Take for example Tony Stark, who went from weapon sealer to superhero in his first movie, and went from selfish to selfless over the course of the MCU. While movies can have great character arcs, I think that the far superior way to have a great character arc is through television. Shows work with much more time to develop characters than a movie does, whether it's a single season or even multiple seasons. However, a problem I feel some shows run into is that they have successful character arcs over the first few seasons, but either fail to continue developing characters after the arc is complete, or have them develop in a new, worse arc. I think a perfect example of this is in The Office, and how we have a perfect relationship arc between Pam and Jim over the first 6 seasons, one that is probably my favorite from any show. However, by the time we get to season 9, the relationship is ruined in my opinion, and is one of the things I hate most about the show. This may sound cynical to say that overdeveloping characters is bad, but I really feel like it's not something that should be tolerated. If, as a writer, you have several season arc in mind for a character, you should try not to give them another arc after that, just so that they won't become static. A show that I think does a really good job with character arcs is Avatar: The Last Airbender. I'm obviously not the first to talk about this, but Zuko's redemption arc is handled very well. It ends roughly halfway through the 3rd and final season, giving him plenty of time to develop, while not leaving him unchanged enough for his character to become static. This struggle with trying not to overdevelop a character would be, in my opinion, a major factor in why many TV shows try to force out characters after a certain period of time. Sometimes it's just better to start over from scratch rather than working with the same characters over and over again. Overall, while TV has a higher probability of ruining characters in the long run, I think it also has the highest possibility for successful character development, which is why I'll say that this round was won by television. I feel like cinematography is a category of filmmaking that most people overlook. I'm not really sure why this is, as it literally controls everything you're seeing all the time during a movie or show. While it's not as important as writing, I still find it to be a large factor in what I determine to be a good source of media. If I'm being completely honest, cinematography in TV shows most of the time bores me. The camera is almost always stationary, with more close-ups and mediums than there are long shots. If given the choice, I will always choose to shoot a shot with some sort of camera movement. It's actually for this reason that I really like the cinematography of The Office, even though probably most people don't. Even though it could be considered to be amateur, I prefer it to most of the cinematography other shows have. Again, I'm going to have to pretty much exclude most streaming service made shows from this critique, as they're usually pretty innovative in their camera work. As far as cinematography goes for movies, there's quite a large range of possibilities. Some films may choose to shoot their movies like how a TV show typically does, while others choose to be exciting and innovative. Camera movements are found much more commonly in film and television, and overall I feel like each aspect of cinematography is better. Close-ups and mediums still exist, but the increased camera movement typically results in more long shots, something I personally enjoy seeing, especially on the big screen. My favorite movie of all time, Baby Driver, has fantastic cinematography throughout the film, and I constantly find myself replaying scenes on YouTube over and over again just to watch the intricate camera movements. However, as I said, there is a wide range of cinematography quality within films. The main area in which this discrepancy can be found is in action scenes. Some movies choose to shoot action with over-edited quick close-ups that don't allow you to see anything, while others choose to film in long takes and let the choreography show more clearly. While the quality of movie cinematography can change significantly from film to film, its ceiling is far higher than most television, with its floor being pretty even with standard TV shows. To me, this means that film once again takes one of the most important categories of comparison. Editing is something that I feel is fairly straightforward, especially within the restraints of Hollywood's continuity system. However, there are still some discrepancies between the quality of editing in both films and TV shows. In terms of sound mixing, I feel like it's more dependent on who works on it, not which medium the person is working within, making it a weak argument for comparison. However, something that does drastically change between TV and film is the special effects. Of course, not all shows and movies include substantial special effects, but when they do, movies tend to do a better job with them than shows. This is mainly due to the bigger budgets and the fact that the budget is often focused on a shorter length of time. While this was definitely the case back a few years ago, the introduction of streaming services has once again altered this field. Netflix and Disney Plus pour a ton of money into their original shows, and so the special effects are just as good as any major film. For this reason, I'm going to give movies a slight edge in this category, but also say that it's most likely one of the least impactful categories on this list. Anyways, with that done, we've officially discussed every possible category of comparison I could think of between these two mediums. To summarize, the creativity of ideas, experimentability, writing, cinematography, and editing categories were won by movies, while the availability and character development categories were won by television. In conclusion, film won more categories than TV did, including the two categories which I deem to be the most important. Therefore, I think it's safe to say that we have the winner of this battle, movies. Congratulations movies on being the better form of media versus TV. Let me know in the comments below if you guys agree with this pick or if you would change it. Also, let me know if there's anything you think I should have added to either argument. I had a lot of ideas for this video and most likely forgot at least a few of them during the writing process. Anyways, that's all I have to say, so I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe if you're new. I post a lot of movie and TV related content just like this, and also really like to hit 100 subscribers in the next couple of weeks. If you want more updates as to what's been going on with this channel at any given time, follow my Instagram _films. Thank you all for watching, and have a good day.